There's an old joke that says that when we tell people we talk to God, they think we're really religious and spiritual. But when we tell them that God talks back to us, they think we're crazy. And it may seem scary to dare to think that we have heard Christ's voice speaking to us, especially if we're not used to thinking of prayer as a conversation. But the Bible tells us that this has been going on from the very beginning. People have been having conversations from the days of Genesis. Back in Genesis, God spoke first to the human creatures. And then after the human got done naming all the animals, the human talked back to God. That wasn't the only time at any point that there wasn't a conversation going on with God in the Bible. Other people who've had conversations with God include Israel, Moses, King David. The list goes on. And certainly Jesus had a lot of conversations. Jesus talked to people. Jesus talked to God. In fact, I'm told that more than 300 times in the Bible, Jesus asks questions. He engages people. He reaches out to people around him, his followers, his critics, even total strangers that he meets along the way. He comes up to them and he asks them a question. He invites them to respond. He's really genuinely interested in what we have to say in response. And so this morning we start this new worship series, Questions Jesus Asks You and Me. This series is based on a new book by Matthew Croasmun called Let Me Ask You a Question, Conversations with Jesus. I read it recently and was really impressed and wanted to share with you many things that this book says. And my hope is that as we begin this worship series together, we will begin to listen for Christ asking us questions and then begin discerning what to say in response, and then to listen for the answer that Jesus gives to us, to get the conversation going back and forth. This may be a new idea for some of us. It may not be a new idea for others. So whether you've been in conversation with Jesus for years or you're just now hearing about this idea, I encourage you to take the risk to come here on Sunday mornings for the next several weeks to hear these questions that Jesus is asking, not only way back when, but now to each one of us. And if we find through this process that we do sense God speaking back to us, we will have done more than develop a new spiritual practice. We will have stumbled into a way of life that God's people have been living from the very beginning. As we begin entering into this whole process and daring, perhaps, to enter a conversation with Christ, I want to begin by encouraging us to answer Christ honestly. Jesus wants to hear, honestly, what we're thinking. Sometimes, we worry about giving the right answer. But in the Bible, all too often, it's the people who give the wrong answer who then go on to get that stronger relationship with Christ. Sometimes we're afraid to answer because if we really answer honestly, it will make us aware of some shortcomings in our own lives. All of us are flawed. And yet a good relationship brings that out and helps us to see those, and yet also to know that we are loved even so. Those of us who've been married for a long time know that we have spouses who know our every flaw, and yet they still love us. What a miracle that is. And what a miracle it can be for us to have this relationship with Christ and have that same experience of being loved no matter what, and being cared for and drawn into an ongoing conversation. So today's question from Jesus is this. Jesus asks us, "What do you want me to do for you?" That's on your front cover of your bulletin. What do you want me to do for you? And then there's a blank bubble for you to think about what you might say in response. This question from Jesus, what do you want me to do for you, showed up 2 times in this morning's gospel reading. There are 2 scenes in that story. One of them is about that blind man named Bartimaeus, who's been sitting along the side of the road, panhandling, apparently for a very long time. He's got his hand out. He's looking for small change. All day long, he's been calling out to everyone who passes, "Have mercy on me," with his hand out. I don't know how long he's been doing this, days, weeks, months, years. But in this scene, it works. Jesus hears him and stops and tells his disciples, "Tell that man to come on over." So the man jumps up and comes over. He doesn't have much time. He just comes. Jesus says to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" Now, Bartimaeus could just keep on doing what he's been doing and say, "I want some money." He could do that. Or he could be really honest, really speak from the depths of his heart and respond with what he really needs. Bartimaeus says, "I want to see." He goes for broke. And then he walks away, healed. He got what he really, really wanted, what was worth wanting. Actually, he doesn't just walk away. He begins to follow Jesus. He's got a whole new orientation to his life, a greater purpose. His life has been transformed because he dared to answer Jesus honestly. Now, perhaps all of us here are thinking, wait a minute. Powerful people aren't supposed to ask us for things. They're supposed to ask what we can do for them. Powerful people always tell us what we want, what we need to do for them. They always ask us to do stuff for them. And God is very powerful. But throughout the ages, people have discovered that's not how God works at all. In fact, God works exactly the reverse. God never asks us for our stuff. In Psalm 50, we heard God saying, "I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds, because every wild animal is mine. The cattle, the birds, everything in the field, it's all mine. So if I were hungry, I wouldn't tell you. The world is mine. I've got everything I need already." I think I hear a little sarcasm on God's part there. But God's making a point. If God ever had a need, which seems unlikely, God wouldn't exactly run directly to us. God's already got everything God needs. And everything that we think is ours is actually already God's. So our relationship with God isn't founded on us providing God with what God needs. It's founded on God providing what we need to us. Jesus came to serve, not to be served. So Jesus said to Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus said, "I want to see." Jesus said, "Your faith has healed you." Again, we may say, wait a minute. What has Bartimaeus done? All he did was sit on the side of the road and beg for money. Is that exhibiting our faith? Seems unlikely. But apparently that's all the faith it takes. Trusting Jesus enough to ask for what we really, really want. That is an act of faith. When we answer Christ's questions honestly, it shows that we at least entertain the possibility that Jesus has the power to give us what we're asking for. Jesus asks us, "What do you want me to do for you?" What would you ask for? Do you still find yourself holding back? Maybe because you don't want to put God to the test, don't want to look selfish. Maybe we think we're not important enough to ask Christ for something big. Or maybe we've spent our whole lives asking for spare change instead of asking for a life-changing transformation. Now you may be wondering, well, is Jesus like just a vending machine God, like a genie in a bottle? We just have to rub it and we'll get exactly what we want? No. That brings us to our other story in this morning's gospel. When those two disciples, James and John, approach Jesus and tell him, "We want you to do for us whatever we ask." Jesus doesn't fall for that. But he asks them the exact same question that he asked Bartimaeus. "What do you want me to do for you?" James and John know exactly what they want to say back. They say, "We want the two top positions in your new administration. We want to be at your right and your left. We want to be on your cabinet." Jesus says, "You don't know what you're asking for." And he's right, they don't. Because the next time in the gospel we hear about people being on Jesus' right and left, we're hearing about the two criminals who were crucified on either side of Jesus, on his right and on his left. So Jesus knows that James and John haven't spent a lot of time really discerning what they want, what's worth wanting. They think they're asking for prestige and power and glory, but that's not the kind of glory that Jesus is heading toward. So he doesn't give them this glory. Instead, he follows up with some follow-up questions. He turns their attention from what they think they want to what's really worth wanting. Jesus is saying, "I know you want greatness, and that's not a bad thing, but you don't know what real greatness looks like. You don't know what it really costs." So sometimes when we ask Jesus honestly for what we want, we don't get it. Maybe when we don't get it, we think we've asked for too much, or we've asked for something that's just too difficult. But if we listen, I think we'll find that Jesus is answering us, considering our response, our request, and saying to us, "Why are you asking for so little? Why are you so desperate for money and jobs and prestige and financial security and success? Why are you aiming so low? Why not ask Christ for true riches, for a purpose, for a glory that looks like service, for an abiding sense of security within, for a life with Christ that will rescue us from any sense of failure? Why not ask for a flourishing life?" Jesus says, "Why do you ask for so little when I'm offering so much? What do you really want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus took that substantial step of faith when he answered honestly, "I want to be healed." Every so often I go to visit people at the hospital, and not too long ago I was visiting with someone, and I was thinking about this book I'd been reading. And so we got to talking about that there at the hospital, and I said to this person, I said, "Well, so what would you say? How would you answer if Christ were right here asking you the question, 'What do you want me to do for you?'" This person didn't skip a beat. She said, "I want to be healed." I was impressed. And I admit it, a little surprised when the very next day I learned she'd gone home. She was honest. She brought it all. Jesus asks us questions and hopes that we will respond honestly. He already knows us. There's no secret there. Jesus asks us to answer honestly. And the conversation then may go on to help us discern further what really is worth asking for. Sometimes we'll get it right away. Sometimes the conversation will go on for a while longer. But we'll have that relationship with Christ, that conversation going on back and forth with someone who really deeply loves us and cares for us. Perhaps Jesus has already started a conversation with you. Perhaps today is the very beginning of that conversation. Jesus is asking, what do you want me to do for you? Amen.